Do you remember the story of Abraham? When God spoke to him and said, "Leave your homeland and your family, and go to a land I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and through you all the families of the earth will be blessed." Genesis 12, verse 3. Abraham didn't know where he was going, but he trusted the promise of God. So he left everything familiar, everything that was dear to him, and he started to travel. Can you imagine how difficult that was? But Abraham didn't just set out on a journey. He actually started a new life. And as he traveled, God revealed himself to him, not just as a great and mighty God, but as a covenant-making God, a God who made promises and kept them. And one of the first things that God did was he made a promise to Abraham in this passage in Genesis chapter 13, and he said, "Look around you and go from place to place. For all the land which you see I will give to you and your descendants forever." When God made that promise to Abraham, it was a big deal because up until that point, no one really had a promise like that from God. You see, God spoke to people before, He made promises to people before, but those were conditional promises. Those were promises that if they did this and if they did that, then God would do something. But this was an unconditional promise. This was a promise that didn't depend on anything except for God's faithfulness. So Abraham could rest on the promise of God, and it would be fulfilled. It says here in verse 15, when the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and suddenly he was filled with fear and anxiety. Because of the magnitude of his wealth, the size of his flocks and herds, the number of his servants, and the number of the other people who had joined him, for he was now a very rich man. I love this picture of Abraham falling into a deep sleep and then being filled with fear and anxiety. Why? Because most of us think that when we get to a certain place of success, of comfort, of ease, we will finally be at peace. But look at Abraham. Even when he was successful, even when he was rich, even when he was blessed beyond measure, he was still afraid. Why? Because life is unpredictable. Because no matter how much you have, there can always be more. No matter how much you know, there can always be something new that comes along and takes you by surprise. So what do? How do you live in the midst of uncertainty, in the midst of change, in the midst of the unknown? Well, the answer is simple. Trust in God. Trust in the promises of God. Look at verse 18. Then the Lord said to Abram, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield and your exceedingly great reward." Friends, no matter what happens in your life, no matter what comes against you, no matter how afraid you feel inside, remember, God is with you. He is your shield. He is your protector. He is your provider. He is your healer. He is your deliverer. And one day He will give you an exceeding great reward. So let's take time right now to thank God for His promises, to thank Him for His covenant, and to thank Him for being a faithful God who never changes.